Good evening. Welcome, everybody, to this event, a screening of The Postman from Nagasaki with an introduction by Isabelle Townsend. My name is Simon Wright, and I am the Director of Programming here at Japan House London. So the date of today's event is significant, since it marks 78 years to the day of the atomic bombing of the city of Nagasaki. And this documentary, directed by Kawase Mika, invites us not only to revisit that history, but also to consider what the past means to us nowadays. We are delighted to be able to welcome Isabelle Townsend, who is with us, to introduce this special event. And this event is also being broadcast to a virtual audience on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we welcome our guests who are watching online. The event is being recorded, and so if you would like to see it again later or tell anybody else about it, you'll be able to view this on our online platforms. So please, let us first welcome Isabelle Townsend, please. Thank you. Please take a seat, Isabelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me and for choosing our documentary.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you. So I'll tell you a little bit about Isabelle first, if you don't know. Isabelle was born and raised in France, and she is a model, actress, storyteller, writer, and producer. As a model, she worked with photographers such as Bruce Weber and Peter Lindbergh, and later signed an exclusive contract with designer Ralph Lauren. It all sounds very glamorous. And she began her acting career in Joel and Ethan Cohen's Barton Fink, which won the Palme d'Or in Cannes in 1991. And after the birth of her first daughter, she created an interactive theatre project in English for French schools. And she has been sharing her passion for the performing arts with young people by directing workshops and plays ever since. Isabelle is a member of Irina Brooks' Dream Theatre Company and tours in theatres throughout Europe. She lives near Paris with her husband and her two daughters. And so we're very lucky to be able to welcome you today here in London. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for joining us. We're going to spend some time before the film screening to talk a little bit about how it came into being.
Yes.
And we have
absolutely
a few pictures.
Yes.
So maybe...
well, first of all, I would like to have a thought to all the people in Nagasaki today, because today is the commemoration of the 78th year of the day the atomic bomb fell on Nagasaki. And so my warmest thoughts are with the people of Nagasaki today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'll move to this gentleman.
Who is he?
You're the daughter of the journalist, writer, and British Royal Air Force pilot, former equerry to Her Majesty the Queen, Group Captain Peter Townsend. And the documentary we are going to watch today is inspired by your father's book, yes? The Postman of Nagasaki.
That's right.
Which was written in 1984, is
84.
That correct?
It was published in 1984. My father went to Nagasaki in 1978 to do research for an earlier book, and he interviewed two people who were children on the day the atom bomb fell on 9th of August 1945, and they were hibakushas, and he was very moved by their story and thought right away he just had to write a book about victims of the atomic bomb. And he met Mr. Taniguchi, thanks to an interpreter who worked at City Hall at the time in 1978, and decided he wanted to tell his story of survival. And
so this book, The Postman of Nagasaki,
and it became The Postman of Nagasaki. which was published in 1984.
Okay. So it's about the survival of Taniguchi
exactly.
Sumiteru, yes?
Yes.
And we see this story, it's somewhat in the film as well.
And the documentary we made 36 years later is about Mr. Taniguchi. It's really to pay homage to two incredible peace advocates, my father and Mr. Taniguchi. Mr. Taniguchi was already quite a busy peace advocate in 1978 when my father met him. My father had great admiration for him. He really admired his tenacity, his will, his dignity, and the fact that he never saw himself as a martyr. He really turned his life around and decided to become an advocate and to raise awareness. And he did it with amazing actions and incredible dignity. And my father respected him immensely.
So that was in the late 70s, of course.
Yes.
But this picture is from a lot earlier, is it?
This is a lot earlier on. Now, this picture was taken, I think it was right at the beginning of a trip he decided to do in 1956. He drove out of misty Brussels in a Land Rover. And there it is. I believe this picture was taken in south of Thailand. And so my father really needed to just to get away and to find himself again. And so he decided to go on a trip alone in his Land Rover. And while he was on this trip, he, how do you say that in English? He had a journal de bord, a journal, one could say a journal. And this journal became his first book, called Earth, My Friend. And so then he decided to turn to writing. And he wrote Earth, My Friend on this trip from 1956 to 1958. And towards the end of the trip, he was asked to participate in a documentary about his trip around the world, a documentary produced by a French company called Gaumont, called Passeport pour le Monde, French title, French documentary, by director Victor Stoloff and Pierre Cast, I should say. And so those are the pictures we're going to see a bit later, the black and white pictures. And my mother was even on the trip as well.
Your mother?
There she is. Yeah. And
so this is in Japan, yeah?
So this is in Kyoto in 1958. Okay. And as you can see, my mother is, I was going to say was, but still is a fantastic photographer, and took some really beautiful pictures on the set of this documentary, Passeport pour le Monde.
So this is in Japan, yeah?
So this is in Kyoto.
Okay, this is
Kyoto on the set. Hours of waiting, as you know, well, I don't know if everybody knows that, but when you're filming, you're shooting, there are hours of waiting for technicalities. So they were having tea, waiting probably to do the next shot.
So this would have been in 1958, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So your mother again.
Yeah.
Here we go.
And see my father extremely focused in the streets of Kyoto.
I can see it's outside a theatre because we've got the word stage door, but I don't know which one, unfortunately. And this is also Kyoto, yes?
Yes.
This is the Heian Shrine, for those of you who've been to Kyoto or you've seen.
But the documentary came as I think it was something that my father enjoyed extremely, because he was going through a really difficult time actually in his life. And I'd like to take a couple minutes to read a passage of the book, Earth, My Friend, that he wrote during the trip. Why saved from death? Over and over again, I have asked myself that question. During these days and nights of battle, I gained an ever-deepening consciousness of life and death. The two seemed inseparable and part of the same process. Life was unimaginably rich and precious and desirable, yet it was unpredictable and obscure and impossible to penetrate. Different. I was amazed at the calmness with which I stood so close to death that I could feel its breath on my face. It is honest and, after all, the only certain thing in life. This awareness of death only made me feel how much more wonderful it was to be alive. Now, for me, it was important to read this passage because the Postman of Nagasaki is very much about survival. And I think when one survives such trauma, you experience, you sometimes wonder whether it was better to survive or not. And I don't want to say too much because we'll see how Mr. Taniguchi felt about that precisely. I think it was extremely difficult for him, and I think sometimes he wished he hadn't survived.
So our next picture is taking us far into the future after your father's visit.
Yeah.
This is what's happening here.
Well,
this
is
you.
36 years later. Life is amazing. I received an email from Mr. Taniguchi's niece asking about the rights to republish The Postman of Nagasaki in Japanese. The publisher introduced me to Mika Kawase, filmmaker, who said she was going through Paris and would like to meet me to possibly develop a project around the Postman of Nagasaki. So we met and we started shooting a little message for Mr. Taniguchi back in Japan, and I promised I would go and visit, and we started shooting the documentary, which you'll see in a few minutes. And the wonderful thing about working with Mika was that we were completely on the same page, and without being able to communicate so much because of the language barrier, we knew we had a strong message to convey, of peace, and we had a wonderful trust. And we've been working on this documentary now for 5 years. Now even possibly thinking of editing a shorter TV version. So it's been an amazing journey of discovery for me, and it still is. The process is absolutely fascinating.
And this is in Nagasaki. This picture is in Nagasaki?
This is in Nagasaki, just by the Urakami River. And we did a lot of walking.
And this is Kawase-san in the front, yes.
Kawase Mika, we'll call her Mika. Mika is right there. I want to take the opportunity to thank her for reaching out to me, because thanks to her, I was able to experience an amazing journey. And I also want to thank everybody at the production company, and especially my interpreter, Kevin, who's just on the right side, my right side, with the black cap. I mean, without him, I don't think we would have been able to capture all the nuances of the language. And everybody at Art True Film, and every single person in Nagasaki who donated for the film, because without them, we wouldn't have been able to finish the film. So,
Marvelous. Thank
yeah.
you. What was it like as following your father's footsteps?
What was it like?
Mm.
Oh my God, how can I describe that? I mean, when Mika first contacted me, my heart leapt because it was the Postman of Nagasaki, and I remember reading the book as a young girl, and I couldn't put it down, and I just thought it was extraordinary. How could one survive such horror, such unimaginable suffering? And I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity to also shed some light on an aspect of my life not many people know about, which is, his peace advocacy, and so with Mika, it took us time to sort of to get to know each other, and basically, I really felt it was an opportunity, and I thank her for giving me this opportunity to reconnect with my father, whom I hadn't seen in so long, and my father was a man of few words. We never really talked about his books, about war, about his service to the royal family. I mean, we never talked about all of that at home much. So it was an opportunity for me to really understand him better.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
To talk, maybe finally to sum up before
Yes.
we go into the actual screening itself, what is the message and the significance that you would like people to remember from this particular documentary?
We made this documentary for young people, for the young generation. As a duty of memory, do we say that in English, a duty of memory? A devoir de mémoire in French. Because one must never forget. I mean, walking through the streets of Nagasaki, I felt the deep wound still, very, very present, beside the joy. And that's what I loved so much about Nagasaki. I could say today that I fell in love with Nagasaki as much as my father did. And one must never forget. That's the message. It's a message of hope. It's to remember every person, every soul who lost their lives, and also to remember that prejudice is still today very present. And I think those are the messages. And I discovered, I've known it for a long time, but I would like to read a little quote from a poet called Paul Valéry. What is war? A massacre of people who don't know each other for the profit of people who know each other, but don't massacre each other. I don't think I have anything else to say.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Isabelle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.